Hello, and thank you so much for having us for the Changemakers in Action and Changemakers in Circularity series. I'm Celine Semaan, and I am honored to be with my guests today, Dao-Yi, Chow, and Dr. Theanne Schiros. We're going to be discussing the One by One Science Incubator, the first science incubator in fashion. So the One by One was an initiative that we conducted at the Slow Factory in partnership with the Swarovski Foundation and the Swarovski team, as well as supported by the United Nations Office for Partnership. The One by One was the first science incubator in the fashion industry, pairing a scientist with an uh, designer and trying to work at the intersection of science and design, building a common language to discuss certain issues together, and really pushing science outside of the lab and pushing design outside of the fashion industry as we know it. So today we're going to be joined by the pair working on the circularity, specifically in the fashion incubator, the science incubator, um, the team at Public School New York with Dao-Yi and Dr. Theanne Schiros, who was the designer who was paired with the Public School New York team.
And Maxwell, who unfortunately can't join us today.
Yes, and Maxwell, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, but allow me to introduce you a little bit to the public school team. So, the public school, as you know, is a pair of designers between Dao-Yi and Maxwell Osbourne, Dao-Yi Chow and Maxwell Osbourne. The pair have won two fashion prizes for their streetwear infused menswear. Following their early success, they were tapped by Caroline Brown, the chief executive at Donna Karan International, to take over as creative directors of the DKNY in 2015. As part of an effort to rebrand the iconic but amazing brand. During their tenure, Chow and Osbourne oversaw both menswear and women's wear for the brand, with their first collection debuting at New York Fashion Week in the last September. Is that true?
Maybe not last September, but
A few
September
Septembers ago.
September
It just feels
2000.
like time is so circular.
Time is a warp right now. So.
That time is a warp. Um, Theanne, did you send me your? Oh yeah, and Dr. Theanne Schiros is a PhD of assistant professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology and a researcher and scientist at Columbia University. She's the co-founder and CSO of Wear Wool, developing biodegradable textile fibers with DNA program color and performance set. There's a typo here. Dr. Theanne Schiros has served as the United Nations ECOWAS Economic Community of West African States Fellow for Sustainable Energy Engineering and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority and an Energy Frontier Research Center. So Dr. Theanne Schiros has been chosen because of her many accolades, but also specifically because of her work on the nanocellulose leather alternative that she has developed. And we wanted to pair Dr. Theanne Schiros with the team at Public School to explore what could a designer and a scientist do together if they were given the opportunity to work outside of the fast-paced fashion industry and be able to explore a collaboration together on a new material, but also on innovating with design and design patterns and using design as a medium for social and environmental change, which the team at Public School has been doing in so many different projects, including with Eileen Fisher Waste No More program that you guys were part of. So I'm so excited. Enough about all these introductions. Let's get to the discussion. So I would love to hear a little bit from you both, Theanne and Dao-Yi, if you can just, talk a little bit about, in your own words, about this collaboration together.
Take it
You
away.
want to start?
Man. Go ahead.
Um, well, what we didn't know, I knew about public school and I was really excited because I really loved that it was so built in circularity. People are always looking for like a new sexy thing. And really a lot of it is using what's there. And then what we learned when we first met is we're both from Jackson Heights, which is, now you don't meet that many people. So from my point of view, as soon as from our first, kind of meeting, which was Zoom because of everything was distance, Dao-Yi and Maxwell were right away like, it should be as much of one material as possible. All their thinking was super, super like rooted in circularity, rooted in can this be biodegradable? So I think something that was really exciting for me was we took on this challenge of making a biodegradable pair of sneakers, because sneakers are super hard. They've got so many different components. They've got glues and rubbers, and then the other aspect for me was how much they pushed the design aesthetic and what they saw in the material that I hadn't seen. So I was like a kid in a candy shop scientifically, because I got this new set of challenges, but through this lens of, kind of them bringing the science to life and something really accessible.
And Dao-Yi, in your words, how was it when we presented you with this idea? I know you guys were very much interested in the science of it, of course, but also in the sustainability of the project. And because you guys have been exploring many different ways to how to be sustainable. So in your words, how was that collaboration, explored on your end?
Yeah, like, our journey towards, sort of just being more responsible and at ease with our collections and the products that we produce and introduce into the world has led us on many different paths. And I think that this was a new path that we had not yet explored, which was, the science behind, uh, creating textile, creating raw material, or developing raw material from a whole new sort of waste stream. In the past, we've done things around, fabrics and textiles that had already been milled, or created from recycled from old uh, fabrics and textiles that had already been introduced into the world. But what was super interesting to us, and to hear about Theanne and her work was, creating something, like really creating something, like growing something, like, sort of, we learned so much about, nano fibers and, cellular, uh, um,
Imagine.
cellular,
Mhm.
Factories, cellular sneaker factories.
yes, our vocabulary and our IQ instantly jumped 100%. So the opportunity to actually work with Theanne, and literally watch this thing grow in front of our eyes, was, I think, sort of the not the last frontier certainly, but like, you know the next frontier for us to really push forward, and it was just so amazing, to
I'm
be
so
able.
excited to hear even more about it. But just a little bit before, just to give a context of what this material is about, Theanne, you had to grow something outside of the lab because of the coronavirus situation that we were all facing. We were all in a pandemic. And so, how did you manage to do the work you typically do in a lab? And tell us a little bit about the kind of challenges you had to face.
Okay, so these little guys on the screen, these were our nanofiber factories. These are our bioleather factories, these cells. So the living cell was our factory. It was everything shut down, right, with COVID. So I recreated a sterile lab environment, one of the rooms downstairs. And so maybe a little bit about the material and then what it took to make it. So what's really, I think, very exciting about this material, and I think something where Dao-Yi and Max and I really kind of connected was, if you're talking, there's organisms in nature, like Celine, you've heard me say this, like microbes are the unsung heroes of biodiversity. I mean, they build materials up and other microbes can break them down. They're low energy, they're rapidly replenishing, and certain classes of microbes, actually because they've existed in like the wild for forever, they've evolved to utilize a lot of different natural materials as food. And so because of that, there's a certain class of bacteria that as part of their metabolism take sugars and nitrogen, take sugars, and they take sugar as like if you want to, like it's a molecule that looks like this, and then cellulose, plant cellulose is like, it's a chain of them. And so this little organism takes those sugars and goes and makes nanofibers. And those nanofibers can be turned into textile materials. But because this was discovered in 1850 in vinegar fermentation, the nanocellulose. Kombucha's been around since 2000 BC, Manchuria. This is the same kind of symbiotic colony that's used to ferment health probiotic beverages. So because of that, I was able to use kind of diverse nutrient streams and not have to have these like really lab grade nutrient media.
Right. So you used like things that were around the house. So tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, so everything has to be really sterile because you don't want other things to compete. But we used tea. I used tea after I would save all my tea bags and then rerun it through to pull the nitrogen out. We used table sugar, but also sugar from any kind of leftover juices or fruits. I would save it and pasteurize it and feed it to the bacteria. Part of it was just the exploration of it. And so you could channel different. So my son would leave his, apple cider out, and that's always frustrating to me. So I put it in the microwave, pasteurize it, feed it to the bacteria. And then they would, I think we have a little time lapse of what these guys do. So this is comparing different sugar sources, like how well can cellulose grow. So the liquid is the food, and on top is the nanocellulose. It floats to the top, and you get this sheet. And because you get these sheets, once I got the pattern from Dao-Yi and Max and we decided what we wanted to do, we grew it to the sheet. So it's also zero waste in production, which I think was really exciting for both of us, that you can kind of grow a pair of sneakers to shape. And so we would, played with vessels, etc. And so this is just kind of comparing two different sugar sources, one kind of table sugar and the other from waste streams. And then you harvest that material on top, and you can process it. My research team between FIT and Columbia University we developed, inspired by indigenous science, we applied traditional leather processing to develop a plant-based tanning.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
I just want to replay it and just get Dao-Yi's input on it. So you guys, I'm sure you felt like there was so many layers of innovation, a layer of innovation from a material perspective, from a design and pattern perspective. I know you are all interested in sustainability, but particularly for this project, can you tell me a little bit the history of using fashion as a medium for social change, but also how was this project able to meet all these criterias for you guys?
Yeah,
At public school.
Public school for us has never been about just making clothes. We knew that early on that we wanted to be able to create a platform, for an exchange of ideas, which is what public school in the real world is all about. um, Understanding that you could, be commercial, but at the same time not have to, sacrifice your morals, or your values. So that was really important to us early on, and obviously has stayed with us. So, this journey and this natural evolution of sorts to work towards lessening our footprint and our harm on the world. I think every designer, if they haven't gotten there yet, will eventually get there and it will eventually get there and need to get there soon. So, being paired up to work on this project fit, specifically into our long range goals and plans. So yeah, the innovation for us was, it took a while, I think, for us to really catch on to understand, the science behind it. And Theanne was so lovely and generous with her time to, be able to let us slowly sort of catch on and use a different part of our brain, to think about this project and how we could, incorporate it into, our future processes. So that, I think, was the initial challenge of really just understanding what the innovation was. And then once we grasped that, like we sort of had to parallel path understanding the science and then getting uh sorry, my screen just went black. Understanding the science and then also implementing that with our design process.
Incredible. Yes. Theanne, tell us a little bit about this, the process of explaining science. I know you've been always put in a position of tell us a little bit more, be the teacher of your own invention. And so you've had to do that several times for this program. But once again, please tell us what is this about? Oops, you're muted, I think.
It's more than a pleasure, right? I mean, it's more than a pleasure. So I mean, on top, the idea is that, I mean, when we talk about circularity and innovation in circularity, there's a couple of different ways to do it, right? I mean, one of the biggest impacts ways is the way Dao-Yi and Max in public school have been doing it. I mean, you reintegrate materials into the supply chain, into new products. And that, I can tell you right now, as a kind of a disclaimer, we did the calculations for the reduction in environmental footprint compared to any new material, and this one is much lower, but there's no lower impact than the material that already exists. So I think I want to tip the hat that this innovation, I was so excited that they welcomed it, because people do get really excited about new materials, but I think we all have to keep in mind that there's tons of materials out there, and all our material, a future of fashion that's circular and a future of materials that's circular is either that, they're designed at the beginning to be reintegrated at the end of their useful life, or they're built up by rapidly renewable organisms like the microbes, and then and they're processed in a way that there's nothing toxic, there's nothing that compromises their biodegradability, and then at the end of their useful life, they can be broken down by other microorganisms to provide nutrients for the next generation of materials, which can then feed the microbes to make more materials. So both are paths to circularity, I think. And so the material here that we talked about, it's this nanocellulose sheets, and it grows. It's also kind of amazing. Like you're growing something to shape, and then, but the trick for this material is all these biomaterials, even cowhide, unprocessed biomaterials can get brittle. They exchange water really easily. So the mycelium leather, the cactus leather, much like cow leather, if they're unprocessed, cow leather needs to be tanned. It can be vegetable tanned, which is great, but it's not. It's generally chrome tanned, which is really toxic. But a lot of the exciting new biomaterials, which are always inspiring, to get them to be durable, they kind of have coatings or plasticizers that compromise their biodegradability and introduce toxicity. So that was a parameter space. So by using natural dyes in a green chemistry process of a plant tanning mechanism, we were able to have the effect of what a plasticizer does, which is rearrange the bonds so it's strong and flexible, and then work with it. Because we were so what you can see here on the left is sort of the drying the leather. I mean, we used really traditional wet leather drying and tanning, adapted. But a lot of those techniques, and what you see here is for natural color. One thing is that the public school aesthetic, they wanted to go for like a white and a black, but every time that you change the color, when you introduce color, you can change the fibers, right? It's you're changing things, and so natural black is actually a really big challenge, which I found to be so many things were exciting about this project, but the getting natural black that had a good ductility and strength and a good hand feel was actually a huge challenge. And we accomplished it with two ways. We used really ancient historical dyes like myrobalan and the bark of an acacia tree. And I collected some rusty nails, and I made an iron bath to dip it in, which darkens the colors. And then we also used a fresh soy milk as a binder for indigo pigment. So a lot of this, I think that was special, was it also was an acknowledgement of all the millennia of textile science and cultural heritage that should be, I think, is an opportunity to really celebrate that. and also kind of integrate that in a way that's appropriate and respectful, and kind of not at all like sort of extractive. And so we put all that together. And at the end, both because we ran out of materials and because we're the ultimate like goal of zero wasting, I actually was able to work with a local kombucha brewery. So, you know, you're having a lab at home, it's COVID, you're homeschooling, everything goes wrong all the time. I felt so bad. I had so many messages to Dao-Yi and Max being like, it looked good, you know, I left it out. Like I went to get my kid somewhere and it got moldy because it wasn't full, you know, like really bad. Like, how am I even going to tell them this? But we wound up working with a kombucha brewery, and all the kombucha breweries I found have a SCOBY hotel, which is like these huge nanocellulose sheets that are still, they have live and active cultures, but you can process them. And something super cool, and I think I'm curious to hear about Dao-Yi's reaction to this, because we were so busy by the end making it happen. We didn't really get to mash up on that much on
Yeah, and I want to get to Dao-Yi's most inspiring moments too. Maybe we can jump to Dao-Yi on that point, but SCOBY Hotel, that sounds incredible.
I want to just, so what we did was we actually, to make it grow to shape, since we hadn't grown it, but we wanted it to be to shape, we actually turned it into a slurry and then cast the slurry into the pattern. And so something that kind of, I still think blows my mind, and I'm curious about Dao-Yi, your reaction, and Celine. I mean, you can't take a t-shirt, put it in a blender, pour it, and make a t-shirt again. But with this material, because they're nanofibers, you can, right? You make a slurry, you pour it, you recast it. And that really allowed us to stay true to this minimal waste throughout. But I want to pass it to Dao-Yi. So this is what we came
incredible. I'm so excited to hear, Dao-Yi, from your perspective. I'm sure there were many awe-inspiring moments, but if you can share some of them with us, like from a design perspective, from the way that you discovered this material, like every moment was a discovery, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, lots of mind-blowing moments for sure. And you know, like you have to think about, like, you know, my entire career, Max's entire career, you know, we've approached design and product design, you know, fashion design, you know, through a really specific lens. I'm not talking about our aesthetic, but just, you know, like the ABCs to, you know, like building a product, right? You identify, you know, color and textile, you know, you sketch something out and you get the pattern made, and you know, get the roll of fabric, and you cut the fabric and you sew it, and you know, hopefully someone keeps it for a long time. Maybe they throw it out, you know, or you know, donate it, or but it winds up in the landfill, and then you start all over again. And so we had to completely rewire the way that we thought about designing this product. You know, as Theanne discussed earlier, sort of the circularity, you know, of the entire process of taking raw materials, building a product that breaks down again, that enriches and provides for new raw materials to you know, to build, you know, another product again. Like, that's, you know, mind blowing. And you know, like, of course we've known about circularity and the process, but to actually, you know, witness it and partake in the process is a complete mind, you know, fuck, sorry for cursing. And
No, totally, it's true, because it's so far from what we are, you know,
yeah,
interfacing with.
yeah, it's you know, like, you know, it's like a complete different journey, right? And so that in and of itself was mind blowing. But then, you know, all the different things, you know, like being able to grow the textile to the shape, to the pattern, right? Like, so when Theanne talks about growing, you know, the nanofiber to the pattern, so, you know, like each piece, you know, has a pattern. That's the side of the you know, the quarter of the upper of the sneaker. You have to, you know, normally you would have to cut, you draw the shape, you place that piece of paper or that pattern on top of a big large skin, and you cut around it and you cut the shape out, and then the rest of the skin hopefully you could, cut other pattern pieces, or they get thrown out. But here, you're growing, you're literally growing the textile to the shape. There's zero waste. And so that concept and that idea is mind blowing in and of itself. Like, you don't have to cut anything. You don't have to worry about,
Wasting.
right, any waste. You don't have to worry about, like pattern efficiency and markers and making sure that, all the patterns work together so you get the maximum yield out of the skin or the textile. No, you're growing. Not only are you just growing it to shape, but that's it. You're not making any more than you need. You're not wasting anything. And so that's completely mind blowing. And then the second part was sort of like achieving these colors. Like when you think about black, you're like, oh yeah, like everything is black. My t-shirt, my hat, but you don't ever think about the process and sort of uh, the chemicals and the ingredients that go into trying to create that color. And for Theanne and her team to sort of come up with these processes that date back to 200 BC, like of extracting color from nature. Like, we're not making the color up. If it's not in nature, like, the color doesn't exist. And so for us to like get the nanofibers to read black, like to read like a really true black, was an accomplishment. It's like you never think about that. You just like, oh, you just send
It's
it out to
so
the
fascinating.
dye lot and have it lab dipped, and it'll be the same color we want. So yeah, just some, those two things I think really, little things that from the outside looking in, but as a designer, like if you understand the process, the old process, these new processes should sort of just sit you on your ass and like make you consider everything you ever knew.
I love that. So Theanne, it brings me to our last question for you. Um, how can science push design, in your opinion?
So, I mean, science and design can push each other.
Yes. Well, the question would be,
Yeah,
how
so I
does
think it's,
design, actually, the question is, how did design, the design of the shoe, the design constraints that you had to work with, how did that push science outside of the regular,
yeah,
research that you
I
had?
mean,
Not
I'm
regular,
humbled
because
by
there's
this and how
nothing
much
regular. Yeah, but go on.
I was like schooled by public school in the best possible way, because like what Dao-Yi hasn't mentioned is that together with Max, the material you see here, the sneaker, every part of it except the cork sole is based on the nanocellulose mesh. Every single part of it, it's all naturally dyed, every single part of it. But the textures and patterns you see here, I had never created. To my knowledge, they have not been created. So public school actually co-developed. I mean, they not only did the design and kind of, but they pushed the material development in a very kind of scientific way. So I think like designers were more of a scientist than I was at all like involved in design. Design. So we've done all the lab tests. We developed this material, we do all the like kind of classic, like you test the strength, you test the flexibility, you test the water resistance. But that's not hand feel, that's not look, that's not vibe, that's not texture, right? That's not like, how does this actually work together? Like, I never thought about making laces out of it, right? Every single part of the shoe with its different strengths and material requirements, we made out of the cellulose, because Max and Dao-Yi were so open-minded and so insanely clever about seeing aspects of the material that could be exploited. And I would meet with them and just kind of go back to the lab and try a bunch of things. And then we'd meet like Rogue, Renegade, wherever in Brooklyn we could meet outside safely. And I'd show them the materials and they always saw something I didn't see. So I think science can push design because I think it's honestly, innovating and sustainability is all about dismantling perceived stereotypes and silos. It's just about like, can we get together with a goal? Everybody has a different perspective. Nobody does anything alone. And the more people we can bring in, and the more solidarity there is, the more we're going to innovate. So I don't actually see science like, you know, I really see it like as holding hands in a really, this was like, this is like a love letter to the like nature, to like community, and for me, and to like just the power of collaboration and community, and being, I was blown away by not only the cleverness, but the open-mindedness to kind of take that science and turn it into a design. So I would say, you know, it's wonderful that the material, like I think it makes me so happy that the material and the new thinking was exciting for them. But I would say I had the same rewards out of it and opening expansion of my perspective. So I think that brings me to a question for you, Celine, if I may.
Oh, I was
Because
going
what we haven't done is congratulate Celine on the first ever science fashion incubator, which is quite a feat. Not easy to pull off, not easy to pull off in COVID. And I, you know, we had three beautiful teams: Charlotte McCurdy, Philip Lim, custom
Mara
collaborating Mara
Hoffman,
Hoffman.
collaborator.
So I wanted to say congratulations and thank you for giving us this opportunity and everyone this opportunity to see what can happen. And I wonder for you, you know, what came out of it new for you? You know, what was your moment of awe? And, you know, I wonder how, like, you have this vision, right? And then you brought it to life. And I wonder what surprised you about the outcomes.
This is very beautiful. Thank you so much. I was not expecting to be speaking. I was actually going to extend the same question back to Dao-Yi, but we'll get back to that. You know, it was not an easy project, you know, because we are trying to, as you said, break many silos at the same time, you know, the silo between science and design, but also between non-for-profit and the private sector in the fashion industry, and working across sectors. So it was multiple challenges that we had to face in order to bring this project to life. And, you know, it was COVID-19. We didn't expect to be launching something like this in one of the most challenging years we've ever seen in our you know, so far, you know. So the kind of challenges that we faced were definitely to have to adapt to everything going remote. That was a challenge for all of us, to make sure that the teams were not pressuring our teams more than necessary, because everybody was going through their own sets of constraints, given the pandemic, given the economic pressures that they were facing. I think the documentary that we managed to create together really speaks to that, and I would encourage everyone to, if they haven't seen it yet, to go to 1x1.earth and to watch the documentary that we managed to to put together, that really puts this into perspective. You know, the first science incubator in fashion that's now on hold, on standby, as we are fundraising to continue this project, continue this innovation. But also, it's so important because, as we saw in the first year of this incubator, the pilot program, we saw that there is a need to break down these barriers between science and design, not just to innovate and to create new products, but to also keep the inspiration going. Because through COVID-19, I saw and heard a lot of the designers around us were facing a sort of like uh, blank page syndrome, you know, when you're like, you're unable to create, there's so many constraints and you're just uninspired. And I think that the one by one was able to at least keep us inspired and keep us keep the creativity going, um, keep us challenged, keep us on track, because of the COVID-19 and the pandemic that we all faced. It was very, very hard to just find inspiration and to find motivation. And that was something that my team has faced, and something that I've heard from several teams that were part of the one by one. But because we kept each other going, it was kind of like a community in and of itself. We kept each other going. We really wanted to hit those finish line, even though it was hard. And I know, Theanne, so many texts that I've received from you where I was like, what am I doing? Why am I putting so much pressure on these individuals? But in the end, we are so proud. And it has pushed design further, it has pushed science further. And those are the types of collaborations that the fashion industry needs first and foremost. And what I discovered also through this program is that I thought it was going to be easy, like just put designers and scientists together, give them money, and let them roll with it. But what I realized is that, oh my gosh, this is a first. There needs to be a shared language between science and design. It's something that we didn't anticipate, that we found that we needed to put more time and effort into, because there wasn't any chance for the two to kind of come together outside of the pressure of producing in fashion, or the pressure of creating something that has a capital gain. We were able to develop a common language together. And I am excited to see, hopefully, another year of the one by one, and another year to continue developing this shared language that we are exploring together. That's the innovation for me, is how do we, as we break down these silos, create a shared language that becomes easier for scientists and designers to work together. I am fundraising for the next year. I'm trying not to to be desperate about it, because it's very hard post COVID to fundraise for a project like this. I'm very much hopeful that we manage to get the funds to continue this important initiative, because science and design coming together, that's how we change the world. That's how we bring innovation forward. That's how we create something climate positive. So that's my challenge right now. But I want to turn it back to Dao-Yi, and I would love to hear from you about how did the science push design? How did it push your design thinking? Because I know you guys were already exploring, alternative design thinking, and you were working with like other innovators. So I want to hear from you how science can push design.
Um, Science can push design by simply introducing a new way of thinking. And, I talked about it a little bit before, is like most designers are trained, to think one way, to think about product one way. And maybe there's been a move for designers and brands to, work on more green product. Uh, but ultimately, it's still more product, right? And so the goal isn't to make more green product. The goal is um, to really dismantle. I think someone used that word today. Um, the old way of thinking about how to, like about, product and design and also consumption, right? And so science introduces sort of these new paths for you to think, because it has to start in here. It has to start, you know, inside you to be able to then, plot it out. Just like I was describing how, when we initially linked up with Theanne, like we had to slowly work it out in our mind. And so, you know, if it were not for that innovation that science provided, if it were not for introducing new waste streams and the idea of circularity, the possibility of circularity, then you'll still be stuck in in the route of thinking you're doing better by just making greener products. Certainly that's a step forward, but again, we got to push beyond and scratch beneath the surface. So I think that the science really just helps to rewire the way you think.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That's what definitely motivated us at Slow Factory to imagine a program like this, and to really try to create a safe space, if you will, or like an environment for collaboration, because collaboration oftentimes is for, the hype, or the culture, let's say, not necessarily for the purpose of pushing science forward or scientific discovery. And I know that this material, the first time that Theanne showed it to me and talked to me about it, I fell off my chair. I was like, oh my God, this needs to be something major. And so that's, I would say that the one by one initiative was inspired by Theanne's work. And she was the first person I called, being like, do you want to be part of this? So it's very cool to see it come to life, and to imagine the future of one by one, and to hopefully see it come to life post COVID. So thank you both so much. Any last words of wisdom that you would like to share?
No, but I mean, I just want to thank you, Celine, for continuing to, push forward and putting pressure on yourself to do to do more. I think that this, again, I think the next step is really trying to figure out how to, you know, take this and be able to scale it in a meaningful way, because you know that will be what tears down sort of the old ways within our industries when we can figure out how the science works, um, with the business of it all. And ultimately, it is a business, and uh, you know, to again to just make more green product is not the solution. We have to challenge the way that we think, and we also have to challenge the way that people consume and think about consumption. And I think that these are all ways, all paths to being able to do that, to accomplish that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing that. I think that the Slow Factory Foundation is very much interested in all these issues that collide. For instance, what you just said about the business viability of a product like this, that's something that we're very interested in at the moment. We're interested in scaling innovations, of course, and we're interested to looking at it from different angles and different scales. So this for us was like an important first step, an important first a piece in the puzzle of scaling something. So
Hmm.
oftentimes when we're talking about scaling, people imagine something going big overnight, but scaling takes multiple small steps in order for us to slowly but surely get to the right scale in a most sustainable way. So the one by one initiative is an important milestone before we go to a bigger scale. So oftentimes we look at an innovation like this and we're like, well, how much does it cost? Is it ready for the market? And its success is measured whether or not it's commercial immediately. But for it to be commercial, it needs to have that kind of chance to being prototyped in that way, to being received by the public in that manner, for it to continue its journey into scaling further. So I think it's an ecosystem, right? Like it's like a step by step ecosystem in order to see something like this scale. And for Charlotte McCurdy's innovation as well, for the bio sequence that they created, it was also an important step because it wouldn't have come to life if they didn't meet. Because she was making like um, raincoats with that material, and so Philip and Charlotte came together and it pushed it further. I think that's an important step that often is being uh, you know not taken seriously or not explored enough, because in our society small is insignificant, but in Slow Factory small is beautiful, like the book, Small is Beautiful. Small and slow is beautiful for us because that is an important foundational piece
Yeah.
to grow it further than we can imagine.
Celine, it makes me think a lot of drops make a wave.
Yes.
Maybe we were a drop. And for that, I wanted to say that I was so honored to have been included in this program and so grateful for to both of you and Max for the generosity of spirit, of thoughtfulness, of knowledge. I learned so much, and as an insatiably curious person who just wants to live a life of continued learning, I have a huge debt of gratitude. Um, I think that something that moved me so much about this project was I always think about materials and systems and energy in symbiosis with nature, like you said, an ecosystem. And I think that like this kind of maps that symbiosis between two communities. I mean, these sneakers were total symbiosis of like design and science thinking. It wouldn't have happened without this synergy and the symbiosis of and the generosity and openness of coming to this space to become a drop in a wave, maybe at best. But
So
um,
beautiful. And
for,
shout out to Alan too, because when we first met with Alan from the public school team, he was like, got it right away. He really imagined the possibilities, and that gave us so much hope because when we in trying to create this bridge between science and design, you wouldn't know this, but there are so many cultural barriers to even being part of this to being open enough to working on something like this, to being open to imagine what this could do, and to give yourself the leap of faith to try it, and to get your hands dirty and to get to do it, you know.
I mean,
Hmm.
people resist what they don't know and what they're uncomfortable with, which is hugely problematic in all areas. So I think that that openness and that meeting with like an open mind of saying like, what can I learn and what can I offer, was like, it was a beautiful part of this project. Also, like, I can't believe something we were working on turned into this. So thank you for taking science and making this out of science.
I just hope that this sneaker gets to be, um, you know, preserved in a museum, because it was an important milestone in our civilization to really bridge. I know we are talking about this experiment, but this experiment is an important link to whatever is going to come afterwards. So I'm really grateful that you guys did this, and so proud of you and so grateful for this program. Even if it's 1 year and this is what we've done, I'm proud. And I hope, because I want more for it, I hope it sees another year and another year after that. So thank you so much. Thank you to FIT
Yeah.
for the trust. Thank you both.
Thank you. Okay, this will air with the conference near approaching Earth Day. So any for all the viewers watching, please, because we had to pre-record given everything being remote, please send any questions you have. Do you have a public school general? You can reach me, Theanne_Schiros at FIT. You guys, most of you know that. Dao-Yi, is there kind of for any inquiries or
Yeah.
interest students? We have a lot of interns and such that get very excited about circularity.
Yeah. We can, you guys can email principal at public school NYC. So principal, PAL, at public school NYC.
All
and
right.
and you can email info@slowfactory.com. So
All
thank you
right.
so
So
much.
now you know how to find us. Sorry we couldn't see you in 3D. Thanks to you both. Thanks for having us, Celine.
Thank you so much, both.
Thank
Thank
you
you. Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Peace.